Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Natalie Bauer, and I'm going to be moderating this session today. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction of the series and of our speaker today, Valentina Rojas. Archival Landscapes is a virtual seminar series of the International Archival Affairs Section of the Society of American Archivists. In each seminar, an international guest speaker introduces participants to the issues and advancements in their local context, describing the history, operating environment, and unique aspects of archival practice in their country. The seminar series is hosted by the Graduate School of Library and Information Studies at Queens College at the City University of New York. Our speaker today is Valentina Rojas Rojo, and she has worked on projects for the organization, description, and access of administrative and historical archives, archival research, and she has conducted workshops and training. Currently, she works at the Technical Normative Coordination of the National Archive of Chile as lecturer of the Diploma in Archives of the University of Chile and the National Archives of Chile, and as an independent archivist in various projects related to the management of archives of social organizations and NGOs. She is part of Archiveras sin Fronteras-Chile, the Assembly of Archivists of Chile, and the International Council of Archives. She holds a bachelor's degree in history and a master's degree in archives and records management. So welcome, Valentina, and I'll hand it over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Natalie. And well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm very happy and excited for this conversation. Now I will share my presentation.
I just wanted to mention, if you have questions from the participants of this workshop, if you have questions during the presentation, please write them in the chat and I'll collect them and we'll have a chance to ask a few questions at the end.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Natalie. Yes, I will be happy to make this a conversation with you at the end of my presentation, which I will try to be not too long, but actually I think I have many things to tell. So, well, I will try to show you a general panorama about this archival landscape. I would like to say that it's my perspective about this landscape. So I will structure my ideas around these three. Sorry, so that's, I wanted to start by presenting where my country is placed. So it's that long and thin piece of earth there at the bottom of South America that looks like a Chile, but it's called Chile. So today I would like to present to you my ideas about this particular landscape of this country where I come from, focusing or structuring my presentation around these three streams. So the first one will be the Chilean archival institutionality. The second one, I will focus on archival education in Chile, and I will close with some thoughts and presenting you a panorama of the way in which archivists organize among ourselves here in Chile. Trying to reflect and share some thoughts, regarding our problems, our advances, our challenges, etc. So we will see, and I hope that it will be clear that these three streams flow in parallel and affecting and influencing each other. So yeah, but before I start my presentation, and yeah, I would also like to apologize for if I have any problems with my English, which I don't practice too much since I came back from the UK. You will know soon when I was there. So before starting with with the analysis of these three streams, I will briefly present you two elements that will contextualize my presentation. So the first element for this contextualization is make you a brief, Natalie already told you something about myself and something about of what I do, but I think that it's relevant to give you a little more of detail because you will see how my personal narrative it's linked with maybe this broader and national narrative. Okay, so I did my undergraduate studies in history. So I have a bachelor in history. In my first job, I was hired as an historian, but actually I was working with records in an unexplored and unknown collection. So after a few years, in 2009, I started this first job in 2007. So a few years at the end of 2007. So more or less a little bit more of a year later. In this key year for me, and as we will see later, I think that for the archival situation in Chile in general, I understood what an archive is, and then I realized that I was actually working as an archivist. This is interesting because I had this kind of mind opening during a training course to which I attended that year. That was, I think that just 4 days of training with the few archivists, like more or less professional archivists that we had back in that time. So that key year and in that key moment, I realized that that was my passion. That was what I wanted to do, and everything started to, it was like putting a very important piece of a puzzle in my mind. And because until then, I never had like a passion or I never felt like an historian. So my professional identity was a bit lost, or I don't know, confused. So when I understood exactly what an archive was, what was the value of archives, what was the role of archives, or which could be the role of archives in society, it was a very, how to say, like a very, it marked a point to divide my career, at least, in a before and then and after, a milestone. So after that, I started to get involved with other colleagues that I started to meet and understand and know this small community of people that was studying all this archival stuff, that were worried about the archival situation in Chile. And that's when I joined Archiveras Sin Fronteras. I will tell you more about that organization at the end of my presentation. So that was back in 2011. The organization was put in place in 2010. Then I also started to study more seriously. First by my own, with some books that people started to lend me, but also then on 2010, I think, a private university here in Chile started to give a diploma. So between 2011 and 2012, I studied that diploma. Then I also started to work as an archivist, like a practitioner, with a more clear idea of what I was doing. So started to calling myself an archivist, not very confident yet, but everything changed when in 2014 I won a scholarship to go to the UK, to UCL, with my dear teacher, lecturer, Jenny Boone, whom is here in this seminar. And I'm very glad to see now your picture, Jenny. I hope I see your maybe your live picture in a while. So I was a student at the MA in Archives and Records Management at UCL between 2014 and 2015. And that also was a huge moment for me when my mind was really opened, and I realized what all the potential and the other things that archives could represent and do, and what I could do as an archivist. Finally, I would mention. Okay. So when I came back from the UK, and all this, I will go more in depth later. When I came back from the UK, I started to get involved with the development and the teaching in another diploma of archives and records management. I will, as I say, I will go more in depth later, but I have to say in advance that I had to go abroad to study this Master on Archives and Records Management in London, because the situation in Chile wasn't giving any other chance of studying, at least at that level. So the last thing that I could, like the higher program that I could have in Chile was this diploma that I studied between 2011 and 2012. So that's the very short story of how I came an archivist. And now the second contextual element will be this very brief, I will try to be very brief, overview about the country in general. I don't aim to make a history, tell you a history of the country, because that will take us ages, and that's not the objective of this conversation. But I think that some things must be said before telling all the other things that I want to say. So first mention that this land that you can see in the map here has been inhabited by many people before the Chilean nation and the Chilean state existed. So here I mentioned just a few of these communities. Many of them are still part of our society. So Chile is a very multicultural society. And as many of you might know, we were a Spanish colony. The conquest started in mid 16th century. So after that, the collision, if you want, between these two parts of the history are still present. So we are still dealing with the difficult consequences of the colonial system. So especially maybe you have heard about the Mapuches struggles nowadays. So yeah, that's part of the Chilean situation today. And of course, I won't be able to go too deeply on that today, but that has its archival reflection. Okay, so after that, so the colonial period gets to an end more or less in 1810. So then it's when Chile started to exist as a republic. And another another episode or another period that I need to mention here is I cannot stop mentioning one of the periods that during the last decades has more deeply affected the life and social configuration of Chilean people, which is this civic and military dictatorship led by Augusto Pinochet, that started after a coup d'etat given by the Chilean army to overturn the democratically elected socialist government of Salvador Allende on the 11th of September of 1973. So this dictatorship that was put in place for 17 years left many consequences. I can mention like the most striking ones might be that it left more than 2,100 deaths, more than 1,100 missing people, more than 28,000 tortured, and around 2,000 exiled people. And that those may be the very tangible consequences, but others that are maybe less tangible or maybe less known in the world, because I think that the Chilean dictatorship, it's very known around the world, maybe because the big amount of exiled people, and also because of the brutality of the dictatorship. So another tangible consequence is that in 1980, the dictatorship imposed a new constitution. Okay, so that is relevant because the last milestone that I wanted to mention is that after almost 40 years living under the rule of that imposed constitution, which embodies many of the injustices that were put in place in a systematic way in the country during the dictatorship, and afterwards rooted during the following democratic period, so the last governments, in October 2019, so less than 2 years ago, so we can say 1.5 years ago, a huge part of the Chilean society started a spontaneous and massive movement of revolt, questioning the entire system regarding the political parties, the economical and educational system, the gender policies, the social security and health system, the way in which indigenous demands have been approached, and so on. So during the last months, one can say we as a society and as a country, we are kind of questioning ourselves, and that led us, because of the social pressure, to a constitutional process. So we are now about to elect the group of people that will propose and will write a proposal of new constitution. So it's a process very symbolic, because it's kind of really ending or symbolically ending the dictatorship through putting out Pinochet's constitution. So we hope to have a new constitution in the half of 2022. So just to finish this part, territorially, I don't know if that's a word, but our territory, it's divided in 16 regions, which are the home of nearly 19 million people. And our state is organized, it's a unitarian state ruled by composed by three powers. So we've got the judicial power, the legislative power, which is the parliament, and an executive power, which is the government, which now is organized and composed by 24 ministries. So I wanted to tell you about this because I will make some links with the archival situation. So yeah, now we arrive finally to the first stream that I wanted to talk about. So the first one is the archival institutionality. And the first element that I would like to mention about this archival institutionality is the institution of the National Archives of Chile, which, as Natalie told you, I work part-time on that institution. So I'm very close and I really value the work that we do there. So the history of this institution, it was created in 1927. So if we make the maths, this institution still don't have 100 years and was created more than 100 years after the Republic was established. So that gives us some ideas. The regulation, the main regulation that we will see more in depth later, of the institutional archival of this main institution of archives in Chile was published in 1929 and is more or less the same until today. So I put an exclamation sign. These national archives have been under the Ministry of Education until 2017. So that year, the Ministry of Culture was created. So this institution was moved under that administration. And I put this because I think it's relevant because it depicts very well, from my point of view, this more patrimonial idea and more historical view of archives in this country. Okay, and mentioned that the National Archives has only four buildings. So we have presence just in 3 regions. I mentioned earlier that we have 16 regions, so it's a very bad proportion. And we are more or less 120 workers in the National Archives. So I don't know what's the proportion of workers in other national archives around the world, but what I want to say with this is that we are a very small institution. We have a very low budget. We are part, I didn't mention that, but here in the Ministry of Education and in the Ministry of Culture, we are part of a service that gathers the public libraries, the public museums, and the public archives, which is this National Archive that has two buildings in Santiago de Chile, the capital city, and one city in the north of the country and another one in the south of the country. But that's it. So it's very small, it's very little, and it's very worrying for me and for the archival community in Chile. And the last number is that less than or around the 6% of the ministries that are obliged to transfer their records periodically to the National Archives, as this regulation of 1929 states, just the 6% of them actually comply with that legislation. So that's with the National Archives. So the second element of the institutionality of archives in Chile, just briefly, no, I say always briefly, but maybe I'm not being briefly. This regulation that I already mentioned for the National Archives, it's the Supreme Decree 5200. Then I want to mention these two laws that put barriers to the access and put barriers to the process after the dictatorship. So at the end of the dictatorship, I remember that I told you that Pinochet was in the government and in his regime until 1990. So 1 year after he left the power, he published a law that enables the Ministry of Defense and the police and to the polices and the force, the order forces, sorry, they are not obliged to accomplish this legislation to transfer their records to the National Archive. And the second one is this: after the end of the dictatorship, some truth commissions were put in place to seek for truth and some justice regarding the abuses and human rights violations occurred during the dictatorship. However, one of these truth commissions, specifically the Truth Commission for investigating cases of political imprisonment and torture, this law of 2004 established and imposed 50 years of secrecy of the records of this Truth Commission. So the implication of these two norms represent important barriers to the processes of seeking truth and justice regarding the abuses of the dictatorship in particular, and more generally, cause important damage to the transparency and overall democratic system in our country. So the next two laws that I want to, the next law that I want to mention is the transparency law. And here, just to highlight the year, so that's why remember when I was talking about my own narrative, my personal narrative as an archivist, I think that was not how you say it, was not casualidad, was not the word. Was not okay. So it has a relationship. It has a relation that this law was published and that the archival community started to gather and started to join and to be more visible. Okay, so after this transparency law, this diploma on archives that I studied in 2 years later started. So that diploma didn't exist before this transparency law. So the relevance of this law is that it was for the first time it enabled in a public and political dimension the discussion about the administrative value and the necessity of records and records management policies. So adding this new perspective to the traditional one that I already mentioned, that was mainly focused on the more patrimonial role of archives and records. So, and the next one is the creation of this Ministry of Culture that I also already mentioned. And here I want to highlight it because it can help, we hope that it will help to the decentralization of the archival system, of the Chilean archival system, because it establishes a national archival system, which in concrete will mean, hopefully will mean, the creation of regional branches of the National Archives. So we will have the presence of public archives in other regions, not just in these three that I said, that I mentioned before. The last one it was published just a little bit more than a year ago, because it was at the end of 2019, and is this digital transformation law. And that I put this plus 5 years because the law establishes that the public institutions have around 5 years to put it in place, to comply with all the obligations that this digital transformation law imposes. So the relevance of this law is that, as it is reflected in its name, it is an effort to face the challenges of this not so new digital world. One of the slogans of this law is zero paper, that you might have heard in other contexts. So it establishes, among other dispositions, that the communications between the different institutions of the public administration must be totally digital, as between these public institutions and the citizens. These aims, that for many people might sound logical and of course desirable in this present digital world, actually imply huge challenges from an archival perspective. How do we guarantee the authenticity and the legal value of those digital records? How do we manage those records without breaking their archival chain of custody? How do we preserve them in the short and in the long term? These are questions that our archival community has been addressing for years and are still a matter of discussion and developments. And in Chile, we have to face them even with the few resources that we have in hand. So I just give a glimpse to the institutional situation in Chile, but the next 2 points will also reflect that we are far from being a very robust country archive when we speak about archives. So if for anyone these challenges are difficult and hard to address, in the Chilean context, it's I don't know, harder, I think, or it's a huge task that we have in front, but that everybody knows that it's unavoidable. I mean, we cannot look around and try to avoid all these challenges, because it's reality and we have to, with the resources that we have, face it. And finally, this haven't happened yet, but we are hoping and we are very optimistic, thinking because we have been discussing a project of an archival law. So hopefully, and if everything goes well, which is not something that we can have been granted these days with all the pandemic and the earlier Chilean revolt of 2019, if everything goes through its path, we might have an archival law this year. So this will be absolutely important, because we hope that I have seen this project, and even though it's not perfect, and even though one might make many observations and many comments and make many even critics to this project, this will be a actual 21st century archival law. This will address the problem, at least of this first secrecy law that I mentioned. So it includes the how you say, the elimination of this 1989 law, and does many other things that in like doing a very summarized explanation, it will give more power and visibility to the National Archives, and will put the archives in the agenda. And I have to say that this is possible mainly, or in part, as a no, it's not a consequence, but can be related with what is going on with this digital transformation law. So with this digital transformation law, in which other ministries were involved, the presence and the existence of the National Archives started to appear in the non-cultural circles. So from my perspective, that puts us in a better place to start talking about this archival law. So, but it's nothing certain yet, but we are, as I put there in the presentation, crossing fingers. So the second stream that I would like to address is Chilean archival education. And if I had to choose a word for depicting this element, it would be scarcity. So I am familiar to this topic, and it's one of my topics of interest in my career. Since my master's at UCL, because I did my dissertation research about this. So I presented this revision of my dissertation was titled "Key Issues for Opening Doors: Proposals for Developing Archival Education in Chile." So I wanted to study the situation of archival education in Chile and reviewing some key issues that one should bear in mind when facing the challenge of developing an archival education program. So I already told you that in Chile we had just a diploma. So I was, this was in 2015. So in 2015, I was worried because I knew that the chance of going abroad to learn and to take a master's in archives and record management was definitely was a privilege. The first barrier is the language. You can go to another places in Latin America where they speak in Spanish, but who will pay for that? I went to the UK with a scholarship, with a governmental scholarship, but these scholarships are for all the fields. I mean, engineering, lawyers, doctors. So the chance that we have like a bigger archival community with formal archival education abroad was not like a realistic strategy. So how the question was, how do we develop archival education of quality and in a higher level in Chile? So I started from the beginning, which was, okay, so what do we have to think about this? Which are these main key issues that we have to bear in mind? So in that context of this investigation, I, of course, had to give like a general overview to the situation, to the currently, on those days, situation of archival education in Chile. So I identified in that context, I won't tell you about these key issues because it's not really the focus of what I want to tell you here, but as this contextual chapter of my dissertation, in that chapter, I identified 3 levels. So that I think that through these 3 levels, I can make a description of the situation that hasn't changed that much since 2015. It's still more or less the same. So we have lots of training courses, short courses, a few hours, where someone tells us what an archive is, what a record is, and explains this decree that makes the legislation, this main legislation for public records in Chile. So very general. So this is not, that's, I call it this training trend. It's not education properly. The second one, we can find some modules of archival studies, but in careers of other fields. So we have, I don't know, a career of librarianship, and in the second year, they have one module about archives. Or I have found other of these modules in programs of history studies, which wasn't my case. I didn't have it. So the problem of this level of education is that it's not archival focused. It's focused in other fields of studies that, of course, are related to our field of to the archival field, but they are not as specific and not as, yeah, I'm convinced that we need a specific education, which doesn't mean that we don't have to learn and to be in relation with those other fields. And here I can add the fields of technologies of the information and even museography, etc. We cannot be isolated, but I think that we do need specific or maybe more specific education on archival studies. And
Valentina?
yeah,
Natalie, I just wanted to let you know that you have about 5 more minutes because we need to end at the hour.
Oh, sorry, okay.
For questions.
Yeah, I thought that we have more time, so I was calculating to finish in 15 minutes. So yeah, I will, if you can give me, yeah, okay, I'm going to try to do it as fast as I can. So yeah, and the last level was these diplomas, which currently we have one, which is this diploma on archives, developed and given by the, it's a common program by the National Archives and the University of Chile. So I have been involved in the creation of this program. I started working on it at the end of 2016. Sorry, no, during that whole year, and we started giving the diploma in 2017. So we are preparing the 5th version. And just to give you, yeah, no, I'm gonna pass that quickly. So what I wanted to highlight about this program, and as you can see in this table, is that what I want to highlight is that we have far more applications than the available places that we can offer. So if last year we had 77 applications, even though we increased our available places, we still have less than the 50% of coverage of in relation to the demand of archival education. So again, this word comes into my mind, but the good news is that we're working on it. We are working on developing more and higher level programs for archival education. And this leads us to the last stream that I want to mention. So I will have to pass very quickly and to tell you very briefly about it. So these are some of the archival archivists, organizations of archivists that exist in Chile. James told me when he saw this presentation earlier, he told me, wow, I'm surprised about how many organizations are. Yes, but I have to say that each of these organizations have a few members, aren't big organizations. We don't have much funding, so it just represents the aim and we are keen to learn from each other and to work together with others. So the archival community, it's growing and it's very generous. So we have here also networks of archives related to the human rights, to oral history, to local archives. So now I will pass roughly to what we do as Archivists Without Borders. So as I said, we're a small organization. We're just 8 members nowadays. And we started with a focus on fighting for this archival law. But during these more than 10 years, we have been working on advocacy. If you search for us in the web and in the social networks, you will find that we did a podcast talking about archives and everything related with archives. Here, the picture at the top, we are in a demonstration, in a feminist demonstration of 2019, so 2 years ago, a huge one. The image that it's in the bottom, it's one like a format of minutes that we started to publish when all the revolt of 2019 started, because we saw and we saw that people naturally started to gather, and in the territories, the neighbors, the classmates started to make like this conversation about what is going on, where do we want to go as a society, like very relevant and beautiful questions. And we said, okay, you have to leave a record, you have to leave a testimony of those discussions, because otherwise all these ideas will be lost. And just to get to an end, I think that I'm just in the time. So I want to, the last thing that I want to show you is I'm also part of this Asamblea de Archiveras y Archiveros, which is the assembly, and to say that we started and we were born during the social revolt. So we as archivists, as this archival community, we wanted to be part of that process, and we started to wonder and question, asking ourselves and among us, how we as archivists can make an input and can be part of this social transformation, and yeah. So that was as brief as I can do it. So just to close, I think that these three streams that I have mentioned in this presentation, as I said in the beginning, they are interrelated. And I think that if in Chile we want to have better public policies and finally to have better archives and to give a better service to our users and to the community that we serve too, we need these three elements and we need to foster, and each of them are key, and if each of them are will help the other one to grow. And yeah, thank you. So with that, I'm finishing my presentation, and muchas gracias. Thank you very much. I wasn't able to finish with the final words that I prepared, but I just want to say that this exercise of looking at the Chilean landscape, the Chilean archival landscape, was very interesting. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I'm happy to now to have more of a conversation with you. So I will stop my presentation so we can see each other if someone wants to show their cameras. So I can see Jenny.
Thank you, Valentina. That was such a great presentation. We did have one question, and that is there any way to negotiate for and acquire records that were concealed or not transferred to the National Archives?
Not really. I would say that not really. With the transparency law, we can ask for some records, but as this 1989 law enables these, because it's not just that these institutions are not obliged to transfer their records to the National Archives. More than that, they are able to do what they want with their records, to destroy them without permission. So actually, when you make when you ask them for information through the transparency law, which is our access to information law, I can say always say we don't have that information. We don't have to give you that information. So no, I would say maybe I think that the question wasn't pointing to that to those records, but I can add that to the other records, to the ones of the Truth Commission, yes, there are strategies that are hard to apply, but people has started to see gaps in the legislation. So there are strategies to go through those records, through the records of the Truth Commission. But I would say that through the ones that the Ministry of Defense and the police and the order forces, it's harder. Maybe they can give you something that they don't find it relevant, but the ones that we want for the truth and justice are, until now, I would say, it's a tricky question because, yeah, no, just for asking them, no, I would say.
Okay, thanks.
I
think we have time for one more question. I didn't. Shelley says, do you think that most records from the dictatorship era have been destroyed?
I think that a good answer for that would be no, because it's also important to start viewing that the records of the dictatorship are not only the ones of the repressive agencies. So the records of the repressive agencies are very hard to access, and a part of me wants to think that they are hidden in some hidden office, and that someday we will find, for a chance, we will find them. It's not that they will voluntarily gives those records to us, but I think that it's important to see that the dictatorship was not only made and supported by those repressive agencies. The entire system was the whole government. So all the other ministries did, not all, because I also mentioned that the 6% don't transfer to the, so just the 6% transfer the records to the National Archives. But there are other records that are less visible, that are less obvious, that are less like, that you won't start your research about human rights violations with them. But if I did a project a few years ago regarding the Ministry of Justice records and the Ministry of Interior records, and there you can find information about exiles, about jails, about people that was, ¿cómo se dice? Como lost their jobs because of their political thoughts. So, yeah, to go back to your question, if most of the record, it depends on what we consider these records of the dictatorship. If we consider like the horror and the records of the institutions that killed, disappeared directly, I don't know, and I wish that they are not destroyed. But regarding the rest of the dictatorship records, we have more chances to get access to them, and we do have chances to find important information in them, but it's a more challenging effort for the people for the researchers, for the people that is looking at those records. So I hope.
Thank you so much for answering those questions, and it's now on the hour, so we're going to have to end here.
Natalie,
so if anyone has other questions for Valentina, I suggest reaching out to her through email.
Yeah.
Do you have an email address that
Natalie, I just wanted to ask, sorry that I interrupt, if there is a possibility, if someone wants to continue like 5-10 minutes just for the discussion, like even if you stop the recording and assign your host or something like that, just I feel 5 or 10 minutes more could
be. We can, James, would you be able to do that? I need to leave.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Natalie.
Okay, bye everybody.
Thank you, Natalie. Goodbye.
Okay. So, hi everyone. There's a question from Forget that says, does your archival legislation say anything about the dictatorship records in terms of their use and accessibility?
Not really, because remember, or I would maybe, I want to be even more clear with that we kind of don't have like our archival legislation. It's this decree of 1929, so much earlier than the dictatorship. So and it's a small decree that just says like public institutions have to transfer their records to the National Archives, and a little more things. So no, directly our current archival legislation, if we consider that decree as our archival legislation doesn't address the issues of the dictatorship. But if we consider the entire legislative framework that affects records and archives, we can say that the only ones that mention the topics of access are the transparency law and these other ones that establish the secrecy and the limitations to the archives and records. So yeah, but hopefully, I'm sorry, and they don't, and the only one that specifically, the only one that specifically speaks about the records about the dictatorship might be the one of the 50 years of secrecy of the Truth Commission, but those are records created also after the dictatorship. So it's a difficult question because the other one of 1989 does not says the records of the dictatorship. It was published during the dictatorship, so it's to protect the dictatorship. So I don't know if it was clear.
Thanks, Valentina. So people should just make note that Valentina has shared her email address in the chat. So if you want to contact Valentina, you can do that there. There's a question from Jenny Bunn. The question is, are there archival institutions beyond the National Archives? Are they mostly research libraries, or are there archivists working in businesses and religious institutions and charities as well?
Yeah, definitely. So the archival community in Chile, it's more than the National Archives. However, it's still very, how to say, like, it's not very well known. Many people doesn't know. So many people doesn't know that archive exists, and as myself, a few years ago, there is many people working as archivists that don't know that the work that they are doing, it's an archive. So me and my friends from the Archivists Without Borders, we say that we have put our archival glasses. So we look the reality with this archival perspective, and that's how we identify. So okay, that's an archive. You work in an archive. This institution must have an archive, but like recognizably or easily to recognize, there are not too many archives, but there are like human rights organizations that fought against the dictatorship have like very important and well-known archives in Chile. Also, as you say, business archives and religious institutions, yeah, and even universities and so on. So, and also these public institutions, I know, hospitals, ministries, schools. So yeah, there is a world beyond the National Archive, but from the point of view from the institutionality, I wanted to underline the role of the National Archives. But yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Okay, we're going to wrap up in about 5 minutes, I think. So are there any final questions for Valentina?
I would like to ask something. My name, first of all, thank you. It was really interesting. I work at the National Library in Israel. I'm not an archivist. I specialize in copyright. So I work a lot with mostly personal archives. And what I wanted to ask you is about digital access, digitization, and also making things available, and also about personal archives, but whether you have experienced, whether you have money to digitize, and if you have money to digitize, so if you deal with copyright issues and privacy issues when you make things available. That's it.
Yeah, I would say that we do digitize. of course, there are different realities. Of course, if you go to a small town, a small organization, maybe they won't have the resources to do it, but there are many other institutions that do have the resources. And as I mentioned when I was talking about the digital transformation law, that implies a lot of digitization. I'm sorry with the it's a difficult word, but we are trying to improve, and we need to improve the standards of those digitizations. But we do it, and other smaller projects and more cultural and as you mentioned, like lots of personal archives and NGOs archives and more social organizations archives are also working on the digitization, and just with the specifically with the aim of put them in access and to spread them and to increase the access of records. So yeah, and we do have a personal information, also a protection of personal information law, and we also have copyright laws. So yeah, we have to deal with the problems that I imagine that you deal to, and yeah, so yeah, the answer is yeah, we do digitization.
Great, thanks so much, Valentina. Yeah, I think that brings us to the end of this session. Valentina, thank you so much for your presentation. It's been really informative and very interesting, so we appreciate that a lot. And thanks everyone for coming to this seminar of the International Archival Affairs Section of the Society of American Archivists. We're going to have a spring seminar. We don't know where we're going for that yet, but please watch out for news of that. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, nice to see you.
Thank you.